Gaitonde said, "A painting always exists within you, even before you actually start to paint. You just have to make yourself the perfect machine to express what is already there." Painting and Gaitonde are synonymous. This inherent belief of Vasudeo Gaitonde found expression in a highly disciplined, creative process where he worked on a single painting for weeks at a time. In 1975, the poet and writer Priya Karunakar wrote in an essay, "He decides when the painting has arrived at its capacity to articulate, yet he registers this intuitively." A graduate of the renowned J.J. School of Art in 1948, Gaitonde joined his peers to become associated with the progressive artist group that emerged on the heels of Indian independence in Bombay in 1947. However, he was driven to forge his own singular artistic path. The well-known critic Dhyaneshwar Nadkarni affirms this by saying, "The central characteristic of Gaitonde's artistic personality, it must be understood, is that he likes to stand alone." This independent-mindedness was accompanied by a firm belief in his identity as a painter. This conviction also led him to deepen his study of the arts. Gaitonde was a keen learner and drew from various influences, ranging from Indian miniature paintings to the works of abstract expressionists such as Paul Klee, and even Indian and Zen philosophies to create his own artistic vocabulary that distinguished him as one of India's greatest modernists. In the early 1950s, Gaitonde focused on the human figure. In these works, he adapted the bold colors and fine lines of the Basholi and Jain schools of Indian miniature painting. Less than a decade later, by 1957, however, Gaitonde began to move away from figuration and introduce rigid geometric planes of color into his work. Although he preferred to term these works as non-figurative rather than abstract, the freedom to focus on light, space, and aesthetics rather than the topical or the temporal greatly appealed to him. A few short years later, in 1964, Gaitonde traveled to New York on a Rockefeller Foundation fellowship. Here, he encountered the works of Mark Rothko, and this was an experience that proved absolutely pivotal to his experimentation with color and abstraction. Gaitonde painted The Present Lot a few years later in 1972, and this was at a real high in his career. It was just a year after he had been presented with the Padma Shri, one of the highest civilian awards bestowed by the government of India. By this time, Gaitonde had perfected a technique that involved the meticulous application of layers of paint with rollers or a palette knife. In this manner, he produced a delicate balance between opacity and translucence of paint and revealed through his process the expressive capacity of color. A closer look at this present lot, particularly here in the center part of the canvas, reveals a silhouetted hieroglyphic and calligraphic set of forms that peek through the layers of the canvas almost imperceptibly. These forms were created by wiping off portions of paint with torn bits of paper and palette knives, and actually would go on to become much more pronounced in many of Gaitonde's works from the late 1970s onward. This vibrant yellow pictorial plane is also interrupted by these darker, dynamic horizontal bands that punctuate the canvas. And these are formed by a similar process, which was inspired by his exposure to the art and philosophy of the Far East. As Menezes observes, in many ways, this process of erasure could be regarded as the sublimation of self and might well have served as a means to resist meaning. After all, Gaitonde's quiet search for form and harmony in color was at its core a philosophical exercise, and one that was primarily influenced by Zen Buddhism and the spiritual teachings of both Sri Ramana Maharishi and Jiddu Krishnamurti. Moving back to the present lot, this circle that you see in the bottom third of the work is particularly important. This is a motif that went on to recur in Gaitonde's work, but here in particular, it's a representation of silence, from which he believed the creative process was born. Explaining this philosophy, Gaitonde remarked, "Everything starts from silence. The silence of the brush, the silence of the canvas, the silence of the painting knife. The painter starts by absorbing all these silences. You're not partial in the sense that no one part of you is working there. Your entire being is. Your entire being is working together with the brush, the painting knife, the canvas to absorb that silence and then create. Stay tuned as this meditative yet incredibly powerful work goes under the hammer at our flagship evening sale in Delhi this September 2023.